Welcome to the GCC Podcast, where we explore how global capability centers are being built, governed, and reimagined as strategic engines, not units. Today's episode is especially relevant for leaders navigating scale, complexity, and accountability in global enterprises. Our guest today is Muhi Uddin Farooqui, Global Service Delivery Head and India Legal Entity Leader at Allianz Partners. Allianz Partners is a global insurance and assistance leader enabling businesses and customers worldwide through technology-led customer-centric services. Farooqui is a global transformation and GCC leader with deep expertise in greenfield setups, large-scale global initiatives, and cross-cultural leadership across Fortune 100 organizations, including GE, MetLife, and Allianz. He has designed and executed end-to-end GCC strategies from full legal entity creation to building and scaling global hubs across geographies with a strong track record of delivering consistent revenue growth and cost savings while maintaining high people metrics such as retention and engagement. Under his leadership, these GCCs have emerged as top quartile employers, earning recognition as great places to work for millennials, top 100 safe places for women, and leaders in sustainability and global certifications such as ISO and CMMI. Over the years, Farooqui has held diverse leadership roles, including Global Head of GCCs, Global Governance Head, and leadership across risk, BCP, data privacy, business analytics, strategic planning, operations, service delivery, and training and transitions. Farooqui, welcome to the GCC podcast. It's great to have you here.
Thank you, Suchita. I think it's very kind of you to sort of spend so much time in intro. While you were saying that, I was actually slightly embarrassed as well because I haven't heard such a long one. But thank you so much, and I'm looking forward to this podcast, as you call it, to reach out to as many as the community members, the GCC community members, and I think you're doing a great job in the times when GCCs are at a hotspot. So yeah, thank you.
Let's start by zooming out and looking at the broader GCC landscape, how it's perceived and how it's actually evolving on the ground. So you built and governed GCCs across multiple geographies, often at scale and under regulatory, operational and cost pressures. So my question to you is, from your vantage point, where do you think the GCC model is fundamentally misunderstood today? And what are the hard truths that enterprises need to accept, if GCCs are expected to drive strategic value rather than just efficiency?
Interesting one, actually. I mean, if you would have asked me this question about a decade and a half back, I would have said that there is a journey and we are at a point where we are about to sort of have a breakthrough in understanding and all of that. But honestly, I have a contrarian view on this one, Sucheta. I don't think GCCs are misunderstood to the point that we feel. I think they're very well understood now because a lot of, if you look at the plethora of GCCs today, right from nano GCC concept to heavy scale, built at large scale GCCs. These are not products of misunderstanding. These are products of very well thought of strategy, very very well designed operating models with a very very long term view by very intelligent, well traveled and global leaders. And these leaders have had the opportunity of seeing GCCs evolve in the last 3 decades. And guess what? All the leaders that I'm talking about, these are all global leaders sitting outside of India, right? And as I interact with leaders, I definitely feel that they have a very good understanding of GCCs now. But yes, there are elements which are local to us, and I understand where you're coming from. And that is now upon the GCC leaders in India to open up and have a very, very honest, transparent communication around the local nuances. And I think, people do understand it. I think that's the first part that I want to sort of go ahead and, talk through. And secondly, I think the culture dexterity plays a lot in it. I mean, 30 years back, 20 years back, 15 years back, if you look at it, we've just evolved. GCC hotspots today Look at it. I mean, there are so many hotspots, and when we get on the calls, people already know about it. And I think that is where, I feel that we are at the form of our understanding. It's the fittest understanding, and it's only getting stronger. Well, typically, if you look at how the GCCs should travel in an S curve to avoid any misunderstanding, is that be part of the strategy design, to be part of the design foundation time. I think that is very, very important. That's where you put across your points. That's where you put across your experience. And what I've seen is successful GCCs have three predominant phases. The first one would be, strategy formation and implementation, where organizations would come and test, their, with a very, very high volume, low complexity, and they would just try to look at, whether it's working or not, how the culture is responding, how local regulations are responding. More often than not, the success rate is very, very high. The interesting phase is the second phase, where we go ahead and see transformation and innovation. This is where your metrics start stabilizing, so the baby starts growing. There are needs that baby is also asking for. And, this is where the healthy discussion starts happening of understanding and, getting to know each other. It's almost like, the honeymoon is over and now you are sort of getting into the second or third year of marriage where you start accommodating, adjusting, and also raising your concerns to each other. Uh, this phase is very, very critical, very, very critical. And my urge and my shout out to the India leaders is always that be very honest and oversimplify sometimes, the problems, because the interpretation that your global leaders will have will be exactly how you go ahead and articulate your issues. And that is where I always try to sort of, keep it as simple and get the domain experts on the call. So if it's a regulatory issue, no point of a GCC leader solving it. I mean, get a legal head, get a legal expertise. If it's an HR or a finance, get those experts in to talk through, because they have experience too, and they will be able to articulate those things pretty well to avoid misunderstanding. Once the second phase is successful, Suchita, I feel that is the time when organizations typically move to something called a specialized capability center. But that's where the new age technology comes in. That's where, the steering models come in. And that's where we talk about, high complex work and getting into a long-term strategy and a relationship. And in my experience that I've seen over, a couple decades and a half, is this is an S-curve that keeps repeating itself every 3 to 5 years, because the parent organizations go through a change, and they obviously go ahead and, take GCCs along as a critical lever. So I think that is, not really a short answer, but I thought let me just go ahead and talk about that. Last nuance that I want to talk about on this topic is, you've seen, the central government taking a note of GCCs in their FY 25-26 budget. Clearly spells that, we're being talked about now. You've also seen, how state governments are latching on to the state policies, right? Gurgaon or Haryana is rolling it out in December, January. That talks about the fact that, we're being recognized at the national and the global level.
Yes.
No point talking about misunderstanding. It's the type where you can, open the arms, talk openly, transparently, and embrace the change.
Well, thank you for sharing that, because that actually sets a very strong context, especially around what the expectations are and versus the reality. And you also covered it in the phases. And I love the third point where you covered what's happening at the national level in terms of how government, even like central government or even state level governments, are actually boosting a lot of the GCC growth across the nation. So thank you for that. Now I want to move from the macro view to the execution side of things, where many of these challenges actually play out, right? So you've not only scaled GCCs rapidly, but also set up legal entities, governance models, and end-to-end operations while supporting businesses across 40 plus countries. So when establishing and scaling a GCC from the ground up, what are the early design decisions around governance, talent, or even the operating model that have the most irreversible long term impact? If you'd like to share your thoughts on that.
It's interesting. The kind of questions you're putting through are the questions that should almost be in a playbook as to why, where GCCs are being build. So yeah, thank you for asking that question. I think the first one is the mission and vision of the patent organization.
That's the idea for us to get voices of leaders to share
Yeah.
their experience of what they have done, because that's actually going to help a lot of the newcomers in the industry to understand what goes behind the scenes.
Correct. No, absolutely right. And I think, really the first few points would be around the mission and vision of the parent organization. Because again, make no mistake, organizations are very, very serious when they talk about India as a destination for their GCCs. So if you look at it, typically what I've seen in the corridors of these top Fortune organizations and mid-sized GCCs, everybody is on the path of, you know, automation and efficiency. At the same time, they value their employees and, how to upskill them and get them participated in this entire journey. And for that matter, I think the first step is, it should be the mission and vision of the parent organization really spells out where GCC is. And most of these top quartile organizations have GCC as a strategy
Okay.
in their top 4 or 5 Mm. Key priorities for next 3 to 5 years. And I think that is a very good start point from our designs. Where do you feature, in the overall organization strategy? I think that's the first one. Once you get the chair on the table, and really, and this is something that when I was growing up in this industry, I used to hear that, we should get the chair on the table. Well, the good news for the leaders of our generation is that, yes, we have the chair on the table. And I always say that, please do not make a mess of it, because that is the time to go ahead and talk very, very openly about the challenges of each location, and then really towards the location strategy as the next design component. I honestly feel that the location strategy plays a key role, because when you look at some of these LinkedIn, yeah, and social media, you have a location bias. Think of it. So, Suchita, if I'm going to ask you, IT, tell me quickly, what are the two sites that come to your mind?
Bangalore, Hyderabad, Chennai followed. So it's definitely Bangalore, Hyderabad when you talk about
But
it.
but
Yeah.
tell me, why did you not? Yeah, exactly. So, but why did you not talk about NCR? It has IIT Delhi and Delhi Technological University. Why did you talk about that? Now that is
I
a
think
location bias, right?
yes.
That is a location bias,
We want to change things
and
to
then
be able
hey,
to
I was just putting
balance.
a fast one on that.
No, but that's you're right. Actually, we'll have to change a lot of things to be
Yeah.
able to balance the ecosystem and also be able to move to tier two towns where there are a lot of regional colleges that can give us quick talent, costs are comparatively low, and supply of a lot of support services is far higher.
So I'll come to tier two in a bit, but let me just talk because I have a view on tier two. But yeah, let me finish this part on location strategy. Look, I think, and my worry when we talk about location strategy is that sometimes when the organizations want to come to India, and we sort of engage them in location strategy, like we just saw, there is a location bias, and that is the reason why I always I'm a strong advocate of engaging, let's say, a big four or the companies like Answer and NLB kind of organizations, where they give a holistic view of the entire location, and let this be between the parent organization and the GCC leader to take a very, very informed and intelligent decision. And why I took on Bangalore and Hyderabad is because, years back, I had set up a collection site in Hyderabad against a lot of talk that it has a regional accent and all. We had customer service and collections set up being run out of Hyderabad. And similarly, today we see a reverse thing that, a lot of IT is being set up in Hyderabad and Bangalore. Whereas I feel that this was my stare. I'm sure there are better minds thinking that we should not make these two so heavy that we have cost pressures because people are quitting, attrition levels are high, and suddenly the talent supply is moving on to different organizations. So you have to sort of balance it out. Just to give you a brief example on this one, a living example, we set up our site in Gurgaon, but we have
Okay.
10 to 20% of our population, as engineers, not 20 but 10% of people engineers working on automation, the scientists, and deep knowledge all around us. So it's about how do you just sort of pick up a location, looking at 3 to 5 year strategy. And then you leverage things like, remote work and via your surroundings. The location strategy definitely plays an important one. The second most important part is operating model. And I feel this almost like a North Star for any GCC. When GCCs directly report to headquarters, and thankfully that most of them do now, the directional clarity of strategy is clear. I mean, it is a mandate to have clarity on a strategy. So the moment you go ahead and talk to the headquarters directly instead of, getting somewhere in the maze, I think that's where you see a lot of, execution getting up on the pace, and the sponsorship from the top leadership comes almost naturally. And I think, I've experienced this in the successful setups, that, the top leaders adopt it, they walk the talk, and it just flows from the top. And then, it's a complete sponsorship.
Yeah.
And related to operating model, we've also seen, Suchita, that, a lot of organizations now are into either metrics culture, or else they are into, the product-based verticalized structure. Almost everybody now, right? That gives a lot of room for GCC leader to come and make this role much more meaty than what it was,
Yes.
because now you're responsible for so many product lines. You are responsible to navigate through the culture to make sure that, your culture is consistent as the parent organization. You have different geographies, operating out of, one location. And also at the same time, you have to take care of the local regulation, PNL and other things, so it's very complex. And those are the design principles that you have to think of, while setting up a GCC. Last 2 points, I think, very, very important is your site leadership team. And you and I were talking just before this one that, Allianz Partners Global Business Solutions team seems to be very, very, passionate. I think what makes the difference really, in any GCC is not really the GCC leader. In all humbleness, I can say that it is the leadership team, the site management team. If they are hungry, they are, out there to sort of go ahead and amalgamate and, bring in more talent, at the same time manage the stakeholders, because they really are the face of the organization. They create, they are the most important levers, and of course, a lot of heavy lifting is done by their teams. But to me, if you want a successful design principle for any GCC, the site leadership team is a very good reflection of the same.
Yes, they set parameters too. So I loved how you actually called it design principles, because you've given a great lens on several foundational, or should I say foundation building parameters that covers the length and breadth of what needs to be done and what should be avoided. So thank you for that. Very insightful. Now let's look ahead, because technology, especially AI, is changing how scale, productivity, and success are being defined, right? So your current mandate spans future ready capability building alongside the P&L ownership that as a site leader you obviously have, and anything around operational excellence. So as automation redefines productivity, how should GCC leaders rethink the idea of scale? It's not just adding more people, scale, right? And which leadership mindset or metric needs to change most urgently for GCCs, right, to stay relevant for the next 5 years, let's say 2030 and beyond?
Well, again, I think this is a very pertinent and a relevant question in today's age and time. I think let me take it heads on. I know literally, if any GCC is still stuck, in terms of spans or having more heads, well, let me bring the face of reality in front, that more heads is not a leverage anymore.
Yes.
Unless, you are at a journey where, you are slow in adapting the technology, and, maybe your business model is such that you need more heads. I don't think most of the ITES space organizations or BFSI space organizations really have.
I'll look here then.
I think they've moved on. Yeah, exactly. So I think that is one. And see, if you are too stuck in let's say heads, and head count, and span, and ratios and all of that, you miss out the compounding effect of capability, automation, and adoption of new age technology. I think somebody else will do it. Somebody else will for sure do it. I mean, how many of us, and there's again a live example. I'm sure you just heard about Mold Book. and Anthropic about a couple of
Yes.
days back.
Yes.
I don't know that this will be published, but I think of it. We already have a Facebook equivalent platform for AIs where no human intervention is required
Right.
in
Yeah.
terms of Molbo. Okay, steady. Now, Anthropic, right? I mean, it's an amazing. I mean, we saw the stock markets go down because of Anthropic. Now, I also heard an argument stating that it's just a headline and, still the work will be done by IT organizations. Absolutely, yes. That's a good argument to have. But let me take you back, almost a decade back when Zerodha and a grow kind of brokerage firms came in. We said no, they will not survive, and our conventional ICICI and HDFC's brokerage firms will continue. But look today, I mean,
Yes.
Zerodha and Grow are amongst the top
They're
five.
moving fast. Yes.
Amongst the
Moving
top
very
five.
fast. No, they've disrupted. They've really
Exactly.
disrupted the market. Yeah.
Exactly. And see, that's where I'm going with this. And let me also quote you, an interesting thing that this passed my mind is the LCL Tech's GCC Trend 2026 report, highlights that enterprises are no longer asking, what can GCC execute? No, but they're asking you, what can GCC own? Now,
Okay.
this is
That's a
where,
good
the shift is.
Yes.
This is where the shift is, when exactly. And, now what essentially it means in simple words is that, scale and efficiency centers are fine, but now let's shift to globally integrated operating units, completely accountable for outcomes. And therefore I say that, let's participate in this automation. And it's a journey. It is a journey. And as long as we are participating in it, there is less of fear. If we sit on the sides, there will be a lot of fear. And again, we can take orders, I can execute. But if you sort of in GCC proactively look at your processes and, you have a thought leadership and you start, giving ideas back to your automation teams, trust me, you will be part of those teams. You'll get upscaled. And, so all I'm saying is that instead of getting scared, well, it's a true reality. And then we go to the next one. How do we go ahead and participate? How do we engage? And how do we almost, become the flag bearers of this new technology at India?
Yes.
So that is one part of it. And let me conclude this one saying that, talent as a workforce days are gone. Talent as an innovation engine is where we should be
It is.
focusing on and try and companies are doing it. So even us, we are very clear that, we for us, we are a very, very employee focused organization. We're upskilling our people. We're making sure that they're participating in this. And at the same time, we're also ensuring we're hiring top notch, engineers and automation experts, data scientists to make sure that we participate with the global teams, in the offer.
Yeah. I loved how you took a stab on this question because you covered a lot of relevant examples, especially what's going on right now as we speak. There's so much happening in the world. So thank you for, leveling the GCC landscape with what's going on in the environment as well. So thank you for sharing that. Now I'm going to move to, something which is more light before we wrap up. And that's our rapid fire to know you and the leader beyond just the title you hold. So are you ready for that one? So this is going to
I'm
be
not
just
sure,
your
but sure.
this is just going to be your first thought, no overthinking on this. So the first one is one leadership skill you are still actively working on, which you think you have room to improve. I know you've been at your position for a long stage, but what would that be if you were to improve any skill?
I think agility is something that I keep reinventing. It has a different meaning in different phases. And I think disruption is the new constant. Earlier it was change, but now I think it's disruption. So how do you keep agile at all given point in time is what you have to sort of go and work on.
Yeah, that's totally right. The speed at which you can move and change and adapt to disruption. Thank you. My second one on this is a book, a podcast, or any idea that has shaped how you lead today.
One of my business leaders long back, we were just traveling to the airport once together, and he said that, this book that has sort of, changed my life. And, every time I read that book, it sort of, changes the dimension. So that's one book that I would definitely go ahead and talk about when it comes to changing the mindset. From leadership standpoint, I would always, recommend Charlie Munger. I think definitely, people should read, his letters from the speeches that he got. So I think those are the two books that I definitely feel we should read.
Thank you. That was honest and insightful. Thank you. The third one, the last one on this. Are you an early morning person or a late night deep worker?
I'm a late night deep worker. It's thank you to this industry. I think we've embraced it, all time zones. So I think I'm a late night worker.
Thanks. Farooqui, this has been an incredibly insightful conversation, very grounded, practical, relevant for all leaders building and scaling GCCs today. Thank you for joining us for the GCC podcast and for sharing your experience. To our listeners, if this episode resonated with you, stay tuned for more conversations with leaders shaping the future of global capability centers. Until next time, this is Suchita Vishnoi signing off. Thank you.